Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Chris with Inside the U. I'm excited to bring on my guest to talk about opening day, Major League Baseball, and it's Christina De Nicola with MLB.com. She covers the Miami Marlins, but in the past, she's covered the Miami Hurricanes. So I know that she's still up to date on some of these former Hurricanes that we will talk about in the show. But first off, Christina, how's it going?
It's doing well. Gearing up for the season. The grind of spring training was turning me into an AARP member in bed by like 10, up by like 7 a.m., breakfast in the hotel. But no, I'm doing good. I'm ready for the games to matter.
Sure. And I want to get started with that because anybody watching the show is a big baseball fan, and opening day is such an exciting time. And I want to get a story from you. If you've got a good opening day story, for me, I just want to share one real quick. When I first moved to Miami in 2003, it was always in our plan to get to Miami and go to opening day for the Marlins. We drove across, my friend and I, we drove across the country. We met in St. Louis, drove across the country. We got to Miami just a couple days before opening day, and we had our tickets online. And so we went to the Marlins game. That was Pudge Rodriguez's debut, and certainly turned into a great season with the Marlins. And that was before I even thought about being a journalist. I didn't have any idea what I was going to do when I was in Miami. But definitely an exciting time, and opening day is it's just a great time over the years and all these great memories. Do you have a special opening day memory, either as a reporter or as a fan or growing up?
Um, I'd be remiss not to mention, even though the outcome wasn't what the Marlins wanted, the 2012 opening of the ballpark. I know that's a sore spot, as a former Cane as well, but on the side of the Orange Bowl, but because the Marlins had needed their own ballpark, their own stability. So it was kind of surreal to see that it actually happened. But I would say probably 2019 was it? I think I was there opening day because I had spent like 5 or 6 years somewhat away behind the scenes. So being back on the field and actually in the ballpark covering a game was very meaningful to me, at least from a career standpoint.
Yeah, that's great. And once again, congratulations covering the Marlins. I know you've done it in the past, but getting that, doing that this year, I know you're excited about their season. But let's talk about some former Canes. Let's get right into it. I want to start with the Chicago White Sox. They have got two former Canes on the team and two guys that are really interesting situations. Yasmani Grandal, one of the top catchers in the game. But let's start with Zack Collins. So 2016 first round pick. He's gotten into the big leagues a little bit, put up good numbers in the minor leagues, and kind of just seeing how things are going in spring training with Zack and with the big league club. He's having a really good spring training. I know that the White Sox are excited about him. I know the excitement is surrounding the White Sox is big after making the playoffs first time since 2008 last year, and they've got a really good team once again. So Zach's having a good spring, and basically he's either trying to be the backup for Grandal at catcher, or they might move him around a little bit. Maybe try to find him some at bats, either at DH, maybe first base, things like that. And Eloy Jimenez with the injury, maybe it opens some things up with Zach. But just kind of your thoughts on Zach and where he's at in his career, 26 years old, as he, kind of tries to make this push into being an everyday or, a consistent player.
Well, it's interesting because I remember working behind the scenes with MLB. I'd be producing or editing content for other teams. And if I was on White Sox, Zack Collins, obviously a former top prospect. And I guess it hasn't really quite panned out for him as I'm sure the White Sox and he would have liked. But as you mentioned, he had a strong spring training. I'm looking at the numbers right now, 3 home runs, 903 OPS. The benefit of being in the American League is there is the designated hitter. I guess, bad thing for him in terms of his career personally is that the White Sox are contending and considered, one of the top teams in the American League. So how much can they actually get him in the lineup? But with the DH, there's always a possibility you can move him around, spell a former Cane and Yasmani behind the plate, first base, as you mentioned. So it'll be interesting to see how the White Sox use him this year. But that's a step in the right direction with his spring numbers. But you take those obviously with a grain of salt.
Sure, and there's a lot to try to dive into with spring training numbers. But one of the things that stood out to me with Zach was just seeing some reports, some articles about him. Was he's pretty excited and in a good place, a good frame of mind, happy, having fun. And I think I remember that quite a bit at UM. Very loose guy, very good personality, upbeat, doesn't take himself too seriously. I think about him and his playing with drones or just anything. Zach was just one of those guys that. And I think it's one of those things. Look, if he's enjoying himself, feeling good. I think he could produce like what we've seen him at He's one of the most productive players. Had one of the most productive seasons and careers at that we've seen. So that definitely a good sign. I get okay, and we're just kind of moving on to Grandal. Two-time All-Star. He's, like I said, he's one of those top catchers in baseball. What makes Yasmani so so productive, or makes him such a good catcher? Kind of what he brings to the table to the White Sox.
I mean, I was telling this to someone in one of the spring training parks bosses the other day, is that there aren't many great catchers in Major League Baseball right now. You name him as one of them, Wilson Contreras, JT Realmuto, and I mean, he's great in his own right, of course, Yasmani, but it's almost a luxury to have a competent catcher, and the fact that he's a hitting catcher and he can also game call. I mean, we saw that. He actually was at when I was at so it doesn't make me feel too old that he's still in the league. But I mean, two-time All-Star, you know what you're going to get out of him in terms of production. I'm looking at his numbers now. They're very consistent. And he's going to be crucial to his White Sox team, that is, like I mentioned before, competing. He's got a lot of veteran arms in the rotation to handle. Giolito, I believe Keuchel's still there. So he's going to be pivotal. Catcher's the most important guy there because he has to handle the staff and not as much producing at the plate, but it's an added benefit that he's a guy that can rake.
And to see him produce the way he is at the major league level, I'm really not that surprised. I thought in college, regardless, this is before he was drafted, obviously, but or wherever he was in the draft prospect list, or wherever it was, I just felt like gets to the major leagues, he's going to be one of the best hitting catchers in the league at some point in his career. I just felt like that was the projection he was on. Very impressive power, switch hitter, the whole thing. So not surprised to see the success there, hitting the ball. And you mentioned he's certainly a guy that does well defensively. Another guy, just moving right along, Jon Jay, 36 years old, just kind of, he's kind of at that tail end of his career, but, he's with the Los Angeles Angels, signed a minor league contract with them in the offseason. Did not have a good spring, 2 for 29 in spring. They actually released him and then brought him back the next day, restructured the deal. But he is with the Angels organization. Based on things I'm reading, he's kind of probably going to start at AAA level. What are your thoughts on Jay and really, the career he's had up until this point?
Well, absolutely great career. You think Jon Jay and those years with the Cardinals and the jokes about him being one of the guys who signed the Declaration of Independence, which obviously there's the tie there. But yeah, it's interesting that he ended up with the American League team because, with his versatility, his style of play, in the outfield, that he wouldn't be with the NL, especially if, barring a 11th hour deal, the DH comes back. But I think I actually saw him in January. The Players Alliance came through Miami, and he was out there with a bunch of the local guys giving out equipment to youth baseball players. But no, he's had a great career. I mean, like I mentioned, his St. Louis times, I'm looking again. 2011 World Series, that's ultimately what you're playing for, right, is to win a championship. So he's done that. And goodness, he's 36, 11 years in the league, that's impressive. Once you get to that 10-year mark, not many guys make that, especially these days with the way there's turnover with the analytics and kind of ushering in younger guys into the league.
And it's really impressive because he's not been one of those headline all-star type players. He was a very solid player. I think from his time at and going back before that, he was always considered an ultimate professional and doing things the right way. And it's certainly, look, he can hit, he's right around that 300 mark in his career. But he didn't put up, these crazy numbers where you're just like automatically he's going to be on certain teams. And like you mentioned, that long career, that is something professionals take great pride in, how many years they play in the league. I don't think fans or even in the media, we really evaluate that nearly as much as the players do, but it's certainly a big thing that they take great pride in. So that's great.
Definitely the service time is huge.
Right. Bryan Garcia, another young guy looking to make his mark for the Tigers, earned that closer role last year in his second season up in the big leagues, got the 4 saves last year. He's in a battle in the spring, and I think we'll see how it plays out throughout the year. But Garcia, he's definitely one to watch for. Former Hurricane, young guy, as he'll be 26 soon. So definitely interesting to see a young guy like that in the major leagues for and could have a long career.
Once again, you're breaking up a bit, but yeah, Bryan Garcia, it's interesting because the Tigers have one of the top farm systems in baseball, and a lot of it is predominant on pitching. And so he would be one of those guys to monitor. I'm looking at his 2020 numbers. It was a very strange year for baseball, but 1.66 ERA out of the bullpen. That'll play. The one thing that kind of stands out, though, is only 12 strikeouts in 21 and 2/3 innings. And I know in this day and age that if you don't strike out guys, it's almost like a warning sign. But, he gave up fewer hits, than innings, limited number of runs, only, 10 walks. That's also his first, taste in the big leagues other than like 7 games in 2019. So he's definitely got room to grow. And like I said, the Tigers, they're not expected to compete. So they'll be able to play young guys and see how they fare in the show.
Sure. And like I said, it's going to be one of those guys to watch for as he builds his career. Some former Hurricanes kind of at the end. Another guy that could be at the end is Ryan Braun. 14 years in the big leagues. Last he said was he's even though he worked out with Christian Yelich in the offseason, he's just right now not focused on returning to the big leagues or to the Brewers. All of his career he's been with the Brewers. I know he's touched on a little bit with the DH kind of playing, maybe that's a possibility for him. But Ryan certainly had a big career. He was big at and he had a big major league career. Do you have a sense, what would you guess he's going to do? Do you see that he'll return to the big leagues?
Honestly, from the stuff I've read, I don't see Ryan Braun coming back. I think retirement seems like the logical choice. Last year, I believe he didn't play with, the weird COVID-19 situation, and he hasn't been at spring training, I believe. So 37. At the moment, I feel like the Brewers kind of sense that he's not coming back. It would be kind of bizarre to just suddenly pick it up now. But, that's another guy, once again, great career. Obviously MVP, 6-time All-Star, Rookie of the Year, 5-time Silver Slugger, great at great in the big leagues. I think, the COVID situation, the pandemic, it opened eyes to a lot of people, whether athletes or just people in general, about what matters, maybe family and, being around that, and just the uncertainty of the world kind of made him think, okay, do I want to go through with these protocols and not being able to see my family? That's something that I've heard, a few players mention. It's just how they can't even see their kids or this and that because they need to make sure they don't, test positive or be around friends. They can't go inside, restaurants, I think there's going to be some leniency as ideally the situation gets better. But yeah, I could see that being the case where he just retires.
So another guy that might be, curious to see if he returns to the big leagues is Andrew Suarez. So 3 years played with the San Francisco Giants. He actually, in the offseason, he signed a deal to go to Korea, play in their league with the LG Twins. We have seen this in the past with guys, and Suarez is only 20 years old, lefty, still throws hard, reading some stuff there. They're expecting him to actually be one of the hardest throwers in the league. And I know that surprises to him because, in the major leagues, he's not one of those guys and he really doesn't consider himself a power pitcher. But we've seen this, Christina, with guys that go overseas to other leagues and they do make returns back to the big leagues. Do you see that Suarez has a path back to the major leagues?
I'll put it simply, he's a left-handed pitcher. They always have a chance because whether they're not consistent enough, there's not as many. If you're a lefty pitcher, there's a pretty good chance that you can make it back. And, going overseas, whether it's in Japan or South Korea, there's a pretty good chance, there's going to be scouts watching you. And if you do well enough, and as you mentioned, his velo compared to others is pretty high, some will see it and, pick them up for next season.
So one of the things, and certainly it'd be interesting to follow Suarez throughout his year there, or just while he's there this season. Some three young guys that were drafted out of Miami last year. Slade Cecconi with Arizona, Freddy Zamora, Milwaukee, Chris McMahon, Colorado. All three, I think this is great. MLB.com ranks all three in the top 10 in their respective organizations. I know people are really excited about Cecconi in Arizona, so that's great. He showed a little bit last year when he got over there after he was after he signed, and Zamora, coming back from injury. And then McMahon, maybe he's one of those guys, 22 years old. Maybe he finds himself out of the bullpen earlier than expected. But just, those are three young guys that have a shot of getting to the show as well and down the road. Christina, I know you've covered baseball a really long time, and I want to get your perspective on some analytics stuff. Maybe if there's a baseball or a hitting from the hitting side, let's start there. Is there a statistic that you really like to look at in terms of either determining value of a player or, how good they're performing or anything like that you really like to pay attention to other than, the olden days, essentially just only looking at batting average?
So a hitting statistic I like to look at, MLB.com, we're very, very big on StatCast. And exit velocity is a great way to see if a guy is making consistent hard contact. So if someone is like 95 miles per hour plus, there's a good chance maybe he's having bad luck, and you can't see that from batting average or from slugging and OPS kind of stuff that ties into that. I know one guy who did really well with that this spring for the Marlins, Garrett Cooper. He was also having the traditional stats and hits were falling, hard hits. That gives you an idea of the sluggers of the game. Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge, but there's some guys that'll surprise you, which just shows hard, consistent contact. And then obviously tying into like if guys have bad luck, there's like BABIP, which is what the batting average would be for balls in play. But yeah, batting average, of course, isn't as seen as much as an indication of someone being good, and especially with this time period of baseball, it's a lot of swing and miss or home runs. It's very extreme in that sense. Even pitching, of course, like strikeouts or not.
Yeah, and then just flipping it to the pitching side of it, you touched on a little bit, but just is there a pitching statistic, something that you like to look at there too?
In terms of pitching, that's interesting. This spring, I was focusing a lot on StatCast has graphics, literally of anything. Like you could see, I love looking at pitch usage in spring, because in spring training, a lot of the times, the pitchers, even the hitters, are working on things. And so a classic example that I think I tweeted about last night was Sandy Alcantara kept saying that he thought his best pitch this spring was his changeup, which he throws for 92 miles per hour. It's, as one does, right? That's a lot of people's fastballs. But it was interesting to see the usage. He had upped it, and I like comparing over the years and just kind of seeing what maybe the whiff rate might be. I know if you go even deeper in the analytics, people like looking at spin rates for pitches. I know Trevor Bauer is huge on that for the Dodgers. There's just so many stats, it can get overwhelming. And the thing is, you need to see which ones matter. Obviously, you can cherry pick certain things to fit your narrative. But baseball, definitely, it's not shortage of numbers. But yeah, those are the ones I would say for those two.
And before we get you out of here, I want to take a little bit of a side question for you. And I know you've been to a lot of baseball stadiums throughout your years. Do you have a favorite baseball stadium you've been to? And then do you have one that you hope to go to?
So that's interesting. I had been to all 30 ballparks, major league ballparks, until Texas opened theirs. And I think it was only people who would have gone to the last two rounds of the playoffs that would have been to it now. For major league ballparks, it's tricky. I'm like, a lot of people love Pittsburgh and this and that. I like looking at it as you got to also have really good food. You have to like be, like a different things, but the usual ones like San Francisco is great. I think a lot of the NL East ballparks are very solid in that sense. One ballpark I would love to go to, though, I never got to go to Omaha for the College World Series, and I remember, I think it was my freshman year, the 2018 for the Hurricanes. I didn't get to cover them at Omaha, and of course, I just to this day I remember like the throw to first, against Georgia. I would have loved to have covered that in person, and just that whole atmosphere would have been great.
So I've only covered one College World Series. It was in 06, and I regretted not covering the 08 team going there, even though it didn't work out. Just because I covered most of those games that year. It was a lot of fun covering those teams, all those great players. And I vowed, Christina, there's always stuff going on. It's tough to make that trip, plan for it, the whole thing. It is it's not the easiest thing to cover, but next time Miami's there, I hope to be there. That's kind of my goal, my plan. Maybe it'll happen this year. For me, favorite ballpark, Big Royals fan. I love their stadium, but outside of Kansas City, I got to see the Royals in the playoffs in Baltimore, Camden Yards. It was a great atmosphere. It was packed. It felt like there were only 30 Royals fans in blue, but it was just a great atmosphere before and after the game. Really enjoyed it there. I'd love to go to Fenway. I've never been there, and just being a more grown up with the American League teams, with the Royals. I'd love to see the Royals in Boston. Hope to do that soon. So that's kind of my stadium stuff. But like I said, I knew you'd been to a lot. I didn't realize it was all of them now. So that's great to hear. So
Yeah, Texas Randall, Kauffman Stadium. I got to visit a few years ago. The renovations, it's great. I've never been before, but that's one of the top ones. Fenway, I went to for a Lady Gaga concert, so I don't think I've actually seen it for the Red Sox.
It all counts.
Yeah.
So, well, good. Everybody could check out Christina on MLB.com covering the Marlins. Christina, I appreciate you coming on here talking about the former Hurricanes, talking about baseball, which is great. Hopefully you have a great season. Enjoy yourself. And I know you'll be hard at work. So thanks again for jumping on.
Oh, thanks for having me, and apologize for, you're going to edit it out a bit, but for the horrible internet that I have. Technology hates me.
No, we're all good. Take care.